The clearance threat of John Brennan. That's the focus of tonight's angle. The media have been in a fit of apoplexy after the White House press secretary Sarah Sanders announced yesterday that the president is considering revoking security clearances from certain Obama-era intel officials, along with one from the Bush administration.
It's political. I mean, it's entirely political.
It's punishing your critics.
They're just attempting to now, gaslight and distract from something else.
I think it's very, very dangerous undermining of the intelligence community and almost the creation of an enemies list.
This is not a small thing to have a president suggesting retribution for political criticism in this way.
It reminds me, David Ignatius, of what happened with Erdogan after he took control in Turkey. Who did he go after first? He went after the generals.
What a buffoon. I'm sorry, Erdogan. All right, Joe. Hey, here's how NBC Nightly News led their broadcast last night.
It's an unprecedented threat aimed at some critics of the commander-in-chief's. The White House now considering stripping the security clearances of 6 former intelligence officials.
Dun, dun, dun. It's an unprecedented threat. They make it sound like Trump is threatening to bomb former CIA Director John Brennan's house. Of course, it's hyperbolic reporting, and it comes from Brennan's current employer, NBC. But shouldn't it concern the media that former intel officials are using their credentials to lend themselves credibility as they go off to engage in political combat with the President of the United States? The truth is, former intel officials have retained their security clearances for decades, not as a booby prize for service, but to benefit the government, maybe consulting work and so forth. For instance, the CIA is working on a case involving something a former intel official had worked on. He can use his continued access to act as a reference, maybe give some insights. But has it all gotten out of hand? Roughly 4.2 million Americans had security access or were eligible for access since 2015, according to the Office of the Director of National Intelligence. The General Accountability Office calls this a high risk for national interests. It's perfectly legitimate, though, for the president to recall the clearances of retirees in the interest of national security, isn't it? So if the government needs retired officials to help on cases, well, the government can insist that they go through the normal clearance process again. But when you're talking about individuals like Brennan, it's a wonder how he maintained a clearance at all. Let's look at the Brennan record for just a moment. Before he became their favorite Trump basher, the Democrats in the Senate despised him. Some urged his resignation as CIA director for lying about spying, and not spying on the bad guys, but on the Senate. He's been caught lying multiple times during his government career. Senator Dianne Feinstein in March 2014 called out the CIA under Brennan's leadership for its effort to harass and thwart an ongoing Senate investigation into the Bush-era enhanced interrogation program.
Based on what Director Brennan has informed us, I have grave concerns that the CIA's search may well have violated the separation of powers principles embodied in the United States Constitution. It may have undermined the constitutional framework essential to effective congressional oversight of intelligence activities or any other government function.
Now, of course, Brennan was incredulous that anyone would question his credibility and his integrity.
As far as the allegations of, CIA hacking into, Senate computers, nothing could be further from the truth. I mean, we wouldn't do that. I mean, that's just beyond the scope of reason in terms of what we would do.
Well, naturally, they did spy, and they would spy. What you just heard was a lie. 10 CIA staffers were found to have breached Senate Intel Committee computers. Senator Mark Udall, no conservative, called on Brennan to resign. But Obama protected Brennan. And let's not forget that Brennan was caught lying last year on the Steele dossier.
Director Brennan, do you know who commissioned the Steele dossier?
I don't.
Did the CIA rely on it?
No.
Why not?
Because we didn't. It was not in any way used as a basis for the intelligence community assessment that was done.
Oh, my God, every time I hear that. In fact, 2 former intel chiefs, Jim Clapper and Mike Rogers, both disputed Brennan's claim that the dossier was not part of their assessment. Rogers in a letter to Congress and Clapper last October on CNN.
Some of the substantive content, not all of it, but some of the substantive content of the dossier, we were able to corroborate in our intelligence community assessment.
Well, given Brennan's history of lying and obfuscation and his completely unhinged statements about President Trump, any sane person would question his objectivity and credibility. Trump is right 100% to be skeptical of Brennan and to call him out on his misinformation campaign. As the Wall Street Journal's Kimberly Strassel noted last week, Brennan has been bragging that it was he who started the ball rolling on this entire Russian collusion narrative.
I encountered and am aware of information and intelligence that revealed contacts and interactions between Russian officials and U.S. persons involved in the Trump campaign that I was concerned about. I know that there was a sufficient basis of information and intelligence that required further investigation by the Bureau to determine whether or not U.S. persons were actively conspiring, colluding with Russian officials.
Well, even if you're not wild about everything Trump has done, as David Harsanyi wrote in The Federalist back in March, John Brennan shouldn't be lecturing Americans. He should be the focus of a congressional inquiry. He should be put under oath. And it looks like that may finally be coming.
Well, we have lots of questions for John Brennan, and he will definitely be sought by the committees for an interview. This is an extremely disturbing thing to see both he and James Comey, supposedly impartial government officials carrying out their jobs in very important areas in intelligence gathering and law enforcement, express the kind of extreme bias that they've shown now, which I think reflects quite accurately on what they were doing back in 2016.
Well, the idea that we should continue to allow John Brennan and other deep state partisans to use their security clearances to validate their political attacks is sheer madness. To do so is to allow them to further disgrace the agencies they've already tarnished through their biased actions. And that's the angle.